Hello everybody! Welcome to episode 2 of the Budget Workshop here. If you hadn't seen the first video, my name is Tom. What I do here is I basically make, swords, cars, jets, spaceships, whatever comes to mind. Just neat little things you can hang up on display or put on a shelf, or in the case of the cars and that, you can give them to your kids as a toy. What we do is we make them out of inexpensive materials that you can find at the hardware stores or hobby shops. Mostly wood. Every once in a while we're going to have a little bit of plastic in there. But in any case, for our first video we made a hone edge, and we also talked through a bunch of safety tips, different materials to use, things like that. If you haven't done any kind of wood shop work yet, you want to go back and check that first video. It's a little long, but it gives you all the little safety tips that you need. But we're going to go ahead and skip over those, shorten this one up a bit for the people that have already watched the first one. What I'm going to do this time around is, it's along the same lines. We're going to make another sword, but this time it's actually going to be an original design of mine. It's not going to be based off of anything that you see out there. Maybe a little similar to some, but it is the sword of a character that I used to play when I played Dungeons & Dragons in high school. And the character's name is Janisto. He's actually a Paladin. If those of you who don't play Dungeons & Dragons, a Paladin is a holy warrior. Good guy, goody two-shoes, that kind of character. But he's got a really cool sword that, he's sketched out on paper. I've never actually built before, so I thought, what better time to do that? So what we're going to do, instead of first project around I used plywood, which was a really bad idea. It was the only thing I had that was big enough, but plywood is really thick and heavy, really hard to sculpt and shape, and if it gets too thick, your little bandsaw like this one is not going to be able to cut through it too well. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go and use the material that I've been wanting to use, and this is poplar. It's a nice hard wood, but it's thin, it's fairly easy to cut and sand. It is also a lot smoother. The plywood had a really rough surface. It was hard to get a design to transfer onto this. And the plywood was also a little too thick. It was about a ½ inch thick. Most swords are about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch thick. And so what we have here is a 1/4 inch thick sheet of poplar. Now this one is 4 feet long and about 5 inches wide. Now the length is right for the total length of the sword. The whole sword is about 4 foot. So I'm going to end up actually trimming some of this off to make room for a handle. The first time around I did basically a rounded box handle, which is basically you just square up the handle and then you sand down the edges to make them comfortable to grip. This time around I'm actually going to try to do a round handle, completely round. I have a 1-inch dowel rod, which is a nice comfortable grip. I'm going to use that. It's about as big around as your standard broom handle, maybe a little thicker. So it'll be a pretty comfortable fit for that. And instead of drawing the design originally on a piece of paper and then transferring it onto the wood like I did with the hone edge, what I'm going to do this time around, since this is an original design, there are no pictures existing of it. So I'm actually going to draw directly onto the wood. And that should show up a whole lot better, because if you remember right, the transfer didn't turn out so good and I had to turn around and draw it again anyways. So I might as well just draw right on the wood. So what we're going to do here is get started in a minute. The important thing about this is I am going to be using a table saw. Now table saws are great tools. They cut really quick. They're not so good at silence. If you do a table saw indoors like I'm going to be doing, you have to use hearing protection. Now a small room like this one here, this room's only about 11 feet wide, maybe about 10 feet long. A room like this, the table saw will literally do damage to your ears if you run it without hearing protection. So you want to use that. You want a really good set of over-the-ear plugs that will block out as much sound as possible. I go the extra step and I put little soft earplugs in my ears. And of course, as always, you want to use your safety glasses. And we'll get started here, and I'll fire up the table saw and get this cut out. First thing I'm going to do is trim this down so it's the correct width for the blade. This is about twice the width of the blade, so I need to trim about 2-3 inches off of this. And I'll go ahead and I'll do that off camera here, because you don't need to see that part, it's kind of boring. And not to mention, the sound of the table saw would probably kill your speakers and your headphones, especially if you're wearing those. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut that off camera, and I'll be back once that's done, and we'll go from there. We have our blade cut out. This was a whole lot faster and easier. This one here is going to be a little different than the last one, because we're not going to cut the handle out of the blade material. The handle's actually going to be a separate piece. Like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be that dowel rod that's going to attach here. What we're going to end up doing next, I'm going to cut out a couple of, I'm not really sure what to call them. I call them just blade latches. They're little pieces, little decorative pieces that go on the base of the blade here that build up the thickness of it. We're going to cut them out of this piece you saw briefly on the last video, this little piece of poplar. This is 1/2 inch thick and covered in dust. And what we're going to do is tack this on each side of the blade, make the blade about 1.25 inches thick all total at the base. And once that's done there, then that'll give us plenty of thickness to attach the handle and work with that. Now we've got these blade latches cut and shaped. See them right here. They look kind of simple now, but we're going to get them painted up looking real good. Probably do nice bright gold color. I like gold. And we'll get those attached on here. Now those are going to fit right on here like this. We're going to put them flush with the base of the blade. And once that's on there, what I'm going to end up doing, once these are all attached and glued down, is I'm actually going to take a drill and drill a small hole in here. And that's going to fit one of these little round dowel pegs. Now, if you don't have one of these, it's simple enough. You just take a dowel rod that's about, no more than half the thickness of your handle, and you trim that down to a little bit longer than this, maybe about, this is about 1 inch, maybe 1.25 inches long. And what you do is you take and you drill your hole right through here. Now don't worry about the fact that this center part's only 1/4 inch. Once this is all glued together and clamped down nice and tight, this is going to basically be essentially one solid piece of wood. So you can drill right down through the middle. Now it's important you're going to measure out exactly where the center of this is, because you don't want it off center. It'll screw things up. But we're going to go ahead and drill through that, place this dowel peg right in here, and make sure it's only about halfway down. You want it sticking out. And then once that's halfway out like that, I'm going to take the cut portion of the handle, drill a hole in there that's the same thickness, and we're going to attach it right like that. And that way we're not just gluing handle to blade, and because that'll fall right off at the slightest little provocation. You've got a little dowel peg in the middle that adds some extra foundation in there, so that it's a lot harder for that to come off. And I'll show you a little later. We'll do the same thing with the other end to put the pommel on there. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. For now, I'm going to go ahead and get these blade pieces glued on here and get the handle cut down. And I'll be back in just a minute. We have our blade partially assembled here. Well, the blade itself is actually finished, except for still got to grind down the edge on this, but I'll do that in just a moment. But here we have our little, as I call them, the blade catchers are all glued on, ready to go. I've gone ahead and already drilled the hole here for the dowel pegs that I told you about. I also went ahead and got the handle. The handle is, like I said, it's just a 1-inch dowel rod. We got this cut down to size, sanded to smooth the edges down, and went ahead and drilled the holes on this one too for the dowel pegs. And this is actually going to be our pommel once it's painted. And this is actually a nonagon, a 9-sided shape. And in the mythology of the little world that this guy came from, there are actually 9 ruling deities. So each side on this represents one of the gods. So a little bit of symbolism in it. Anyways, this is all cut and sanded, ready to go on that as well. This has also got the hole for the dowel peg in it. Now, I had to trim down those pegs and ignore the bright orange paint on the one end. We got these little guys here. These are just about the right length. I might have to sand them just a little bit to make them smaller, but they're the right thickness, they're the right length. And what I'm going to end up doing is, as I mentioned before, what you do is you put a little bit of glue in here, and then you push that down in, make sure that's in there nice and tight. Don't be afraid to use a little hammer if you want to, just careful not to break the wood. But you got that in there, and then you'll do the same thing for the handle. Get that glued, and stick that in there. And then you'll have your handle like that, and you'll do the same thing for the pommel on the other end of the handle. What I'm going to do though with this one, before I do all that, is unlike the hone edge that we did, since this handle is actually a separate piece like this, and it's rounded, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask off the ends so they don't get any paint on them, and I'm going to go ahead and actually paint this up. With this one, I'm going to paint the handle, I'm going to mask off the end and then paint the pommel, but I'm going to leave the blade for last because that's still got to get an edge on it. And that's nice geometric straight edges. We can mask that off real easy, unlike the hone edge with all those rounded edges. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get these finished up and painted, and I'll be back with you for the final assembly of it. And then after that, we'll go and finish up the blade. We have all of our pieces cut and sanded and ready to go here. I've put an edge on the blade. It's a little difficult to see here, but it'll show up better when it's painted. This time I did put a pretty good point on there. Again, you don't need to do this. It's real easy to injure yourself with that. I just got a little carried away with the sanding. But everything's cut out, ready to go. We got the gold on the blade catches and the gold on the pommel. The handle's been painted up. It's going to be this nice black color. Now, of course, it's up to you with the handle. You can just do a plain color like this, like I did, or if you've got the skills and the materials, you go ahead and do a nice little leather wrap on it. And that'll actually look real good and add a little bit of bulk to the handle, make it a little thicker in case you've got bigger hands. But in any case, what we do next is we get going here. Our good old friend Gorilla Glue. And we get this off of here. And now you don't need to fill these little holes with glue because that'll just make a mess. But what you do instead is just a little bit of it in there, just enough to hold things in place. We go ahead and fit the one into the dowel in there. I did do a little bit too much glue, but that's easy enough to smooth around. It's easy enough. Do that. There. We'll set that aside to dry. And we do the same thing with the pommel. Now, the reason I'm doing this instead of just going ahead and attaching the handle is I want time for everything to dry. And the handle itself, since it's in the middle, it's easier to just stick everything on each end of that and call it good. And again, like I said, we just do the same thing here. Try not to overdo it this time. And I already did. Oh well. But yeah, that'll make a bit of a mess. Squeeze that on in there. Alright. Smooth that all around. And the nice thing about this actually is this glue, when it dries and we do our little touch-up, that little patch where we touched up the glue instead of the wood, it's going to actually kind of look like melted metal when the paint's on there. So it'll kind of add to the authenticity of the look. But that's what we got for now. I'm going to go ahead and let that glue dry. We'll be back for the assembly. And then after that we're going to paint the blade. Now that we have the holes drilled in our handle, and our pegs placed in the blade and the pommel, it's a simple matter of just gluing them together. Now, of course, you know, in hindsight, it probably would have been a little better to drill a hole all the way through and just stick a dowel rod down the middle, but, you know, live and learn, right? Been a while since I've done one of these like this, so Anyways, this will work pretty good for display anyways. You don't want to be trying to hit anybody with it. But anyways, once you got this done, it's a simple matter. Putting everything together using our old wood glue again. There we go. Get that open. Alright. And just like the other stuff, you want to be careful you don't put too much in there. And you make sure you get these. Now, if they're slightly different sizes, you want to make sure you get the right one in the right opening here, or it's not going to work. So, just make sure here. Alright, that one's got to go there. Alright. So then we just take and we put our little dab of glue in there. Again, you don't want to go overboard on this. Go ahead and squeeze that little bugger in there, nice and good. Now, since we don't have any way to clamp this, really about all you can do with this is press it in real good. And just kind of stand that there, make sure it's on nice and good and solid. And we'll set that somewhere where it'll be able to rest up like that. And once that's ready to go, I'll go ahead and I'll glue that onto the blade. And then we're going to go ahead and do the final paint coat on the blade, and we'll be back with the finished product. Well, that took a little bit longer than I expected to dry, but here we have our finished sword. Now, you know, this is a fairly simple design. I like it. The character that uses it, again, is a Paladin, a holy warrior. So, you know, he doesn't have a whole lot of really fancy, you know, ornate items, so he went with a simple sword. This particular one is a two-handed weapon. As you can see, I have rather large hands and very comfortable gripping that like that. But, again, this is a pretty simple design to work with. It's just a straightforward blade. The blade catches here and maybe the pommel are about the most intricate parts of this design. And, I'm going to actually include a quick sketch with some dimensions on it down below in a link. And this is actually a very nice, simple sword to get started on. If the hone edge last time seemed a little complicated, a little involved for you, if you want to give it a shot making one of your own, this would be a good one to start with. And this is a very nice, basic design. You can do all sorts of stuff with it to customize it, make your own. You can, of course, change out the pommel shape, shrink the handle if you just want a one-handed sword. You can get rid of the blade latches if you want the whole blade to show through. You could put a jewel in the pommel, put a jewel in the blade latch. You can add a cross guard if you want. This particular design doesn't have one because of the way it's shaped. For the most part, these blade latches will do a fairly good job of stopping a sword from coming down at them. But again, if you want to, get rid of these, add in a cross guard, maybe change up the shape of the pommel, shrink the handle, shrink the blade. There's a number of things you can do to actually customize this and make it your own little thing. And if you do something like that, or if you just want to reproduce this, I'd love to see it. You can go ahead and, shoot a short little video or maybe just show a photo of the finished product and send that to me. I'm actually going to have a Twitter set up next week. And I'll let you know what that is in the next video. And don't be afraid, if you don't have a video camera, hold on to your picture and you can go ahead and send that to the Twitter once that's up and running. And, well, that's about it for this week. Just, of course, as always, use your safety glasses, use your hearing protection if you use a table saw, use a dust mask if you use a sander, and don't stick your hands in any of the power tools when they're running. And that's about it for this week. So we'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.